Welcome to the deep dive. If you thought the global news was complicated lately, well, hold on. Our source material today is quite a stack. We're covering simultaneous high-stakes moments. You've got unprecedented Vatican diplomacy, the really unsettling mass ostrich culls in Canada, and then jumping right into the first-ever high-res map of the developing human brain. It's a lot.
It really is, and it's a deep dive that really forces us to connect these, well, seemingly disparate stories. Our mission, as always, is to synthesize this information quickly, give you the context behind these big diplomatic moves, these viral health controversies, and some pretty complex science breakthroughs.
Exactly. We want to pull out the most crucial facts, those aha moments that really matter, so you get real insight without, getting totally overwhelmed by the information tsunami.
Right, respecting your time, giving you what you need to know.
Precisely. So let's unpack this. We'll start where diplomacy is often quietest, but its influence can be incredibly broad. The geopolitical chessboard. Okay, first stop. Our sources take us to the Vatican. Pope Leo XIV recently held his first in-person meeting with Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas. And the tone was very intentionally described as cordial.
Yeah, cordial. But what's really interesting here is the focus of their talk. It wasn't just, a general chat. It was very targeted. Two things: the urgent need for aid for civilians in Gaza, and crucially, the continued push for a two-state solution.
And the timing is important too, right?
Right.
This was almost a month after the U.S. brokered ceasefire in Gaza started.
Exactly. And it really reinforces the Holy See's long-standing position on this. They actually told Israel's president back in September that a two-state solution was, and this is a direct quote, the only way out of the war.
So the Vatican is clearly cementing its role here, a kind of moral and diplomatic advocate.
It seems that way. And another layer here. Abbas's visit was timed for the 10th anniversary of the comprehensive agreement between the Holy See and the State of Palestine. So that adds a bit of historical weight, It establishes a clear baseline for their diplomatic relationship going forward.
Okay. Now, contrasting that sort of structured, formal diplomacy, let's pivot. We need to talk about a far more controversial, much more fragile truce happening in Sudan. The Paramilitary Rapid Support Forces, the RSF, they have apparently agreed to a 3-month humanitarian ceasefire. This was brokered by the Quad countries, the U.S., Egypt, UAE, and Saudi Arabia.
Right. And this immediately raises a huge red flag. Why is a humanitarian truce being met with such, extreme skepticism, even cynicism, globally?
Why is that?
It's because the RSF is facing just mounting accusations of horrific war crimes. We're talking ethnically motivated massacres in El Fasher, potentially thousands of unarmed civilians killed. It's really grim.
And the evidence seems to be piling up in real time, which makes this ceasefire look, frankly, cynical. Hours before this news broke, satellite images appeared. They seem to show RSF recruits actually trying to hide bodies in mass graves.
Yes, and Yale's Humanitarian Research Lab looked at this, suggesting it points towards systematic body disposal.
Systematic? Wow.
The gravity here is just immense. An activist group, Abbas, they believe tens of thousands of civilians might have been slaughtered just in El Fasher. And to really underscore how serious this is, ICC prosecutors, that's the International Criminal Court, they're actively collecting evidence, alleged mass killings, rapes, other atrocities.
Gosh.
And on top of that, the WAP reported Benman killed at least 460 people at a hospital and even abducted staff members.
It just seems so deeply cynical that this deal involved the UAE. I mean, they're widely seen as the RSF's main backer, right?
Sure.
Even though they deny supplying weapons.
It absolutely complicates the whole narrative, doesn't it?
It really does. Does it undermine the whole agreement?
Well, and critically, Sudan's actual army-line government has already said they plan to keep fighting. So, this truce, it's really unlikely to end the 30-month war. For the RSF, you have to wonder, is this ceasefire just a strategic move, a way to deflect international heat from these terrible allegations, rather than a genuine step towards peace?
Makes you wonder. That humanitarian pause sounds very conditional, very questionable, if any real progress can happen.
Highly questionable, yes.
Okay, so from those high-stakes diplomatic maneuvers and conflicts, let's shift gears. We're moving to another arena where authorities and the public are clashing. Public health crisis decision-making. We need to talk about the complete depopulation, that's the official term, of nearly 400 ostriches at Universal Ostrich Farms in British Columbia, Canada.
Right, and this situation has become a huge public flashpoint, a real controversy. The Canadian Food Inspection Agency, the CFIA, they're moving ahead with this call. It's based on what they call a stamping out policy, which they say is in line with WHO advice.
And the reason is fear of H5N1 avian flu spreading.
Yes, apparently 69 birds in the flock have already died from it. And they're acting now because the Supreme Court decided not to intervene, not to hear the case.
But the owners are fighting this tooth and nail, aren't they?
Oh, fiercely. Their argument is basically that the flock has developed partial herd immunity. They point out the last bird flu death was way back in January 2025. And they're also casting some serious doubt on how effective or accurate the agency's testing methods even are.
And what's really fascinating here is how quickly this blew up, right? From a local farm issue to this global thing drawing in big names.
It really escalated. You've got senior U.S. figures lobbying against the cull, like U.S. Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr.
Wait, RFK Jr., seriously?
Yes, and also former TV host Mehmet Oz, Dr. Oz, who was appointed by Trump to a council. He even offered to move the birds to his ranch in Florida.
That level of political, almost celebrity involvement is, well, it's pretty unusual for an avian flu cull.
Yeah. It really is, and I think it shows how this issue has become a kind of lightning rod for broader public feelings, especially post-pandemic. You see protesters online, and they're often expressing skepticism about vaccines, about government health mandates in general.
Yeah, that makes sense. The farm spokesperson used strong language, too, calling it murdering healthy birds.
That phrase really captures the moral weight of the opposition. And when you look at the actual procedure, the details outlined in the CFIA manual from 2016, well, it underscores why it's so contested and, frankly, visually horrific.
Tell us about that procedure. What complete depopulation actually mean for a big bird like an ostrich? It sounds awful.
It does. The preferred method is lethal injection, but the manual says it requires 3 people. Think about this. One person has to physically hold the bird down, often by literally sitting on its back.
Sitting on it.
Yes. Then another person holds its head still, and a third person administers the injection. Other official options include using gas, or in some situations, actually breaking the bird's necks. Shooting is listed only as a last resort. So that brutal, specific detail needing to physically overpower the animal, like that, it explains why the protest imagery has been so potent and why the owners feel this is just an unwarranted atrocity against what they see as healthy livestock.
Okay, let's leave the world of political and agricultural controversy for a moment. Let's dive into the precision of pure science. We've got this monumental collection of 5 papers just published in Nature magazine. They're delivering what's being called the first ever Atlas of Brain Development.
Yeah, this is genuinely a breakthrough. Historic proportions, really. It's the main output from the U.S. $500 million BICAN project.
BICAN?
Right, that's the Brain Research Through Advancing Innovative Neurotechnologies initiative, a huge U.S. project. And this atlas, it maps the cortexes, that's the outer layer of the brain in both humans and mice, with just unprecedented precision. It tracks the exact molecular events as cells differentiate from stem cells. It's incredibly detailed.
Wow. Okay, so unprecedented precision. What did this mapping actually reveal about how brains develop, especially, the differences between mice and humans?
Well, the scope itself is just massive. For the mouse brain, just in the visual cortex, they mapped over 500,000 individual cells and identified 714 different subtypes. The big surprise there, they found many neurons continue to sort of take up their specialized identities after birth, specifically between day 11 and day 21 in mice. That's much later than people generally assumed.
Interesting. Okay, and what about us? For humans, they use tissue from 8 fetuses, right?
Yeah.
What did they discover about our own cortex development?
So for humans, the major finding is about these things called progenitor cells. You can think of them like the stem cells that act as a factory, churning out all the different neuron types the brain needs. They use these unique DNA barcodes to track the lineage where these cells came from, and they found something really specific. These progenitor cells, they generate excitatory neurons before 20 weeks of development. And then there's this critical molecular switch.
A switch?
Yeah, exactly. They flip and start generating inhibitory neurons after that 20-week mark.
Okay, that sounds incredibly precise. For the listener, maybe quickly explain the difference. Excitatory versus inhibitory neurons.
Oh, yeah, good question. It helps understand the significance. So think of your brain's wiring like an electrical system. Excitatory neurons are like the accelerator. They generate impulses. They drive brain activity. Inhibitory neurons are the brake. They quiet things down, stop the brain from overfiring, which is absolutely essential for normal function.
Got it. Accelerator and brake.
Right. And this atlas shows us that the timing of when the brain starts making its brakes is really strictly regulated, right around that 20-week point.
That specificity, that switch point, That seems hugely important for understanding developmental issues, maybe.
It really is. And they also noted something else interesting. The generation of other supporting cells, astrocytes, oligodendrocytes, it's much more continuous and sort of drawn out in humans compared to the shorter bursts you see in mice. And that longer, protracted development probably contributes to why the human brain is so uniquely complex.
So putting it all together, what does this mean for you, the listener? If this is the map, how do researchers, use it to find the treasure, so to speak?
Well, this data is considered very valuable, that's the quote, for studying complex neurological conditions, things like autism and schizophrenia. Because now we know exactly when the brain is making its accelerators versus its brakes, researchers can pinpoint when and where specific genes involved in these conditions might be getting switched on or off. It gives them a new, really precise way to find critical genes at specific times and in specific cell types during development. That's crucial for figuring out when and how these conditions might actually start.
That really does sound like a massive step forward for the field.
Yeah.
Amazing. Okay, moving from that incredible microscopic complexity, let's switch to some everyday biology we often get wrong. Let's quickly debunk some common myths about hair loss. This is based on insights from dermatologists and surgeons in the sources.
Yes, let's tackle the biology of baldness. Okay, myth number 1. You only inherit baldness from your mother's side.
Right, and that is debunked. Totally wrong. Well, partly wrong.
It's true, a key gene is on the X chromosome, which men get from their mothers. But baldness is shaped by many, many genes. It's polygenic. From both parents. Plus, hormones, lifestyle, environment, they all play a big role. Your father's side definitely matters too.
Okay, good to know. Myth number 2, stress causes baldness.
This one's a bit more nuanced. Severe stress rarely causes permanent pattern baldness by itself. What it can cause is this temporary shedding called telogen effluvium. Up to 70% of your hair can prematurely go into the resting and shedding phase, so lots of hair falling out temporarily.
But not permanent.
Usually not.
Yeah.
However, severe stress can accelerate underlying pattern baldness and or genetic alopecia if you're already genetically prone to it, so it can speed things up.
Right, makes sense. Okay, and the third myth, this one's persisted, probably because it sounds good. Baldness is linked to higher fertility, more macho, right?
Yeah, also debunked. It's described as a flattering story, not science. The idea seems plausible because both baldness and fertility involve male hormones, specifically DHT. But baldness means your hair follicles are sensitive to DHT, not necessarily that you're producing tons more hormone overall.
Sensitivity, not quantity.
Exactly. And in fact, some studies even suggest men who go bald early, like before age 30, might actually have lower sperm counts. Though, overall factors like age and general health are probably much bigger players in fertility.
Okay, let's wrap up by returning to global politics, and specifically the surprising longevity of power in some places. We turn to Cameroon. Paul Biya, the world's oldest president at 92 years old, was just sworn in for a new 7-year term.
92. And he's now Africa's second longest serving leader. He won the recent election with 53.66% of the vote. And just think about this. If he actually serves this full 7-year term, he'll leave office when he's nearly 100 years old.
Wow. But the election wasn't exactly smooth sailing, was it? There was significant controversy.
Not at all. His main rival, Issa Chiroma Bakery, immediately called the win a constitutional coup and blatant electoral theft. The atmosphere is reportedly very tense. There were protests, and those led to at least 5 confirmed deaths.
So the political situation is described as tense yet controlled. But there are these widespread concerns about governance and obviously the big question of succession down the line.
Right. I mean, Biya came to power way back in 1982. And then a constitutional amendment in 2008 got rid of term limits, which basically paved the way for him to keep running.
But what's really striking, I think, is the demographic situation there.
Yes. Over 70% of Cameroon's population, nearly 30 million people, is under the age of 35.
70% under 35. So you have this massive young population, probably pretty disillusioned, whose entire lives have essentially been governed by this one man.
Exactly. And the sources include quotes from residents just expressing fatigue with Biya's rule. They cite failures on basic things, lack of roads, clean water, jobs. That huge gap, the sheer length of his rule versus the needs and frustrations of a very young population, creates this fundamental tension. It really defines the political stability or maybe instability of the nation.
Okay. And finally, just quickly, let's touch on the conclusion of the first phase of the public inquiry into the Southport killings in the UK.
Yes, this phase wrapped up with some very powerful, very painful testimony. The parents of the 18-year-old killer, they apologized publicly for their failure. But the families of the victims responded with just raw emotion. They expressed complete disdain for your excuses. It got so tense, the inquiry chairman actually had to intervene and ask for calm.
Understandable.
Mhm.
And looking ahead, what's the focus for Phase 2?
Phase 2 will focus specifically on something highly relevant to public safety today. The risk posed by young people who develop a fixation or maybe an obsession with acts of extreme violence. Hashtag outro.
Well, what a deep dive today. We really covered some ground, moving from, the necessary political context for a two-state solution and the extreme fragility of that Sudan truce,
Yeah.
right down to that incredibly specific molecular switch found in the developing human brain. Quite the range.
It really was. And we covered situations that really demand critical thinking, maybe questioning authority a bit, the ostrich cull decision, the truth behind the RSF ceasefire, the legitimacy of the Cameroon election. Hopefully this knowledge helps you see the complex web connecting genetics, hormones, political power, biological mechanisms. It's all intertwined in these stories.
Absolutely. And we'll leave you with this provocative thought to mull over, stemming directly from that situation in Cameroon. Consider the sheer longevity of power we're seeing there. A 92-year-old leader set to rule until he's almost 100. How does that concept of political succession, combined with the widespread disillusionment of such a young population, remember 70% under 35, how does that shape the long-term stability and the very destiny of a nation?
Right. What are the implications when leadership lasts longer than most people in the country have even been alive? How might that huge demographic imbalance ultimately reshape that nation's future?
Something to think about.
Definitely. That's a vital question to ponder as you connect the dots on global events this week. Thanks for diving deep with us.